speaker is is another longtime friend from on Semiconductor, and his name is Irvin Guy. Irvin, are you ready to speak to us?
Yes, Klaus, how are you today?
Very good. And where are you?
In California.
Okay, very good. Yeah, everybody's in California. I wish I was there with you guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you're going to speak to us about automotive, which is kind of a new subject for us here at Wi-Fi Now. So I'm excited about it. I want to learn a lot about it. So do you have a presentation you want to go ahead and share?
Yeah, and I thank you for that. I think last time we met in April online, we talked a little bit about 6C and the rollout on the
Mm-hmm.
smart home side. And I think
Mm-hmm.
this will kind of continue that discussion on some of the other applications
Right.
that are available. Okay, so here we go. So what I'll talk about is some of these features in terms of automotive connectivity. Wi-Fi in automotive is definitely not a new thing. One of the bigger trends, though, is how prevalent it's becoming in different cars, different classes of cars, and some of that is actually surprising. So I'll talk a little bit about trends and drivers, how 5G versus 6 gigahertz plays out. Maybe slightly different from what Matt just talked about, but some of the core thought process is that they complement each other. What is the value that 6C brings? Unlicensed spectrum is a obvious big one, but there's other features and benefits that actually make it a very good choice for the vehicle market as well. We'll talk a little bit about the ecosystem rollout. That will kind of cover what Chris talked a little bit about on enterprise earlier in the day, what Matt talked about in some of the other applications, then also the opportunity it means for some of the semiconductor players in this market. I think there's a lot of opportunity in innovation, in bringing new value to the end consumer in the car. We'll touch a little bit about those as well. Now, if we take a look at some of the patterns, one of the big trends right now is customers, before they would take a look at, okay, the selling point would be how fast I can accelerate. One of the thing research shows right now is customers are more interested in what is the overall driving experience? What are the safety features? Whereas lane assist might have been a luxury a while ago, more and more cars, even in the entry level, have that. The geo and segment growth strategy is shifting. We talk a lot about 5G and autonomous, but the fact of the matter is that many of the entry-level cars are targeted to, freshly out of school graduates or a certain age demographic, and those, customers are actually more in tune with connectivity. It's a higher premium to them in terms of their selection process, and Wi-Fi hits the cost points and the applications these consumers are used to. In fact, not only are they used to, they expect them. And I think that's another opportunity for the industry to innovate. And then the other trend, of course, is the electrification. If you are at a charging station, I think most people will realize you don't want to be bored. There's other things that you want to do from an entertainment standpoint or productivity standpoint, all of which demands robust, good Wi-Fi. And then if we take a look at it from a manufacturing standpoint, the amount of compute that's going on with advanced driver assistance services, something that ON actually is a player in, which is very important to us. Just this week, there were a few announcements with large car OEMs, and the push towards autonomous and the embedded cameras that are in more and more cars, not just Tesla, but many of the other cars that are coming up this year and in the last few years. All that means there's a lot of data on the vehicle that has to be transmitted or shared into the cloud. And we talk about where does it need to be real time and where can it be opportunistic connection to Wi-Fi, and why Wi-Fi 6E is probably the right choice for that. And then if we take a look at the passenger-centric migration, if you're going to be autonomous, you will have more ability from a passenger side or the back seat side to enjoy or use that time in terms of entertainment and productivity. These are the three buckets that I talk about in terms of where the value is: infotainment, telematics, safety, and security. If we take a look at infotainment, obviously there would be social media, there would be emails, there's maps and traffic. But in telematics, a lot of the stuff is not necessarily happening in real time. It's happening in terms of transfers, maybe on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, but it does not have to be instantaneous. So there's a lot of value in where the car manufacturer or the consumer probably doesn't want to upload that information over cellular. They might just want to do it on Wi-Fi, either at the home network or when they are at a hotspot. And if we take a look at safety and security, V2X, which would be a lot of different things to pedestrian, to the infrastructure, to other cars on the road, tracking. A big market for us, for example, would be a first responder segment. If a police car is pulling up into the depot at night, all that body cam video footage that might be cached onto the vehicle does not need to be transmitted in real time. Wi-Fi is a good solution to actually transmit it once you are in the depot. From a 5G standpoint, it can provide wide area network, but also it does offer low latency. You do have a licensed spectrum. However, there was a UK study from Ofcom, even with 4G, the coverage on the roads is not sufficient. So 5G is going to take time to roll out in many parts of the developing world. So Wi-Fi actually creates a model which is more cost effective, maybe more accessible to the large portion of the world's population. And we talk about why the inherent architecture of Wi-Fi 6E lends itself to different price points that make it more accessible in different cars. And we will talk a little bit about some specific features, but really the thing that differentiates 6E and that some of the other speakers talked about in the other use cases is the capacity. It goes up, one with the extra channels that you get, the width of the channels, 160 megahertz, and also the latency is improved. And I'll talk about some of the very specific use cases that help from a feature standpoint in autonomous driving, as well as Wi-Fi 6E for cars. The big one for me is there's already enough monthly fees that you have to pay. I'm not necessarily interested in picking up another carrier fee on a monthly basis for cellular access in the car. I would rather like a model where the smartphone that I pretty much have all the time with me docks effectively to the car using Wi-Fi 6 gigahertz channels, has the right latency, the right bandwidth, and for most of the applications, it is sufficient to provide cellular without one extra monthly charge. And if the car does demand, you will always have the ability to have cellular at an extra upsell from a service standpoint. And then the offload model has something that we're already used to. I mean, we don't even think twice about when we're on our smartphone and are we on cellular or are we on Wi-Fi? So we don't really need to make that choice. In fact, we need to make it more seamless from a car standpoint as to what the handoff between cellular and Wi-Fi is, and maybe favor Wi-Fi now that we have the bandwidth and the lower latency on the Wi-Fi 6E embedded solutions in the car itself from a technology standpoint. And I think one of the speakers earlier talked about from an enterprise standpoint, what the trends would be. Well, I think one of the biggest trends would be that you do have the capacity with the 160 megahertz push. I'll talk a little bit about that, why we will expect to see a major upgrade shift as we head towards Wi-Fi 6E in the enterprise space. I think in enterprise, we actually see a major shift from an upgrade 40 megahertz channels to 160 in terms of frequency reuse, which actually then bodes well for transactional Wi-Fi use by cars, not only because it can be more seamless with things like Passpoint or what the WBA is doing, for example, with the wireless roaming, the intermediary exchange. You can have dealerships, gas stations, all in terms of the same network. So the consumer does not have the hassle of logging into different networks. It's a more seamless experience. I think on this one, we're pretty familiar with this, but the main point I want to highlight is the number of channels obviously has gone up for the US market. We're starting to find out more concrete details on UK your session, for example, on India, what the direction is a couple of weeks ago, and what Brazil might be doing as well. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, the spectrum will go up, and we also expect that congestion will go down, because one of the good things that we get from this technology is it's not going to be supporting the legacy clients. So that in itself would benefit in many new use cases, including automotive. From a important standpoint, Wi-Fi 6E brings a lot to the table. But in terms of automobile, really three buckets: capacity and speed. The spectrum helps towards that. Multi-user MIMO. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next chart. Especially with all that data that we have, multi-user MIMO becomes even more critical, especially in the uplink. Congestion and latency. There's a lot of information out there that it's less than 3 milliseconds or less than 2 milliseconds, but there's different ways to calculate that latency advantage. But the fact is, we can now target new applications that are latency sensitive. And I think automotive is one, and obviously industrial IoT would be another one that targets that as well. And then from a range and power standpoint, I mean, especially if you don't want your vehicle sitting in the garage to have Wi-Fi interrupts, which would then lead to more of a battery drain. So the way the technology can be approached is, you can obviously have the advantage of 6 gigahertz VLP modes. You already have the Wi-Fi 6 features like target wait time. But then from a system standpoint, you can integrate functionality like Zigbee, which helps you extend to the home network when the car's parked in the garage, because you don't need the higher power Wi-Fi interchange on the windows are down or what the climate in the car is. And I'll touch upon that a little bit later. Now, this kind of shows you the features in a little bit of a deeper dive. I think one of the biggest things is the reduced management clutter. At a very basic level, most of the access points obviously would have either 2.4 or 5, if not both, in addition to 6. And from a client scanning standpoint, if you are already talking to the 2.4 or 5, you don't need to do a separate push on the 6 gigahertz status. You can do that simultaneously. But even if it doesn't have the information on 2.4 and 5, with 6, there's limitations as to how often the client can go out and check. So all this will reduce the management clutter, in addition to the fact the legacy clients are not going to be supported in 6. And then on enterprise, like Matt was talking earlier, there's a Cisco study out there that pretty much highlights that even with the frequency reuse on 5 gigahertz, with the availability of 80 megahertz channels, the bulk is still being used in 40. So when you go to the Wi-Fi 6E, those enterprise do now have the number of channels. If the magic number happens to be, what customers are saying, 8 in terms of frequency reuse. So pretty much you're going in channels from 40 to 160, a 4 times increase, which really benefits when your automobile is not in the garage. Maybe it's in a commercial garage, or it's at a charging station, or it's at a dealership. You do have that ability to offload cellular with Wi-Fi 6E, given the capacity and the latency as well. And it also lends to different cost optimizations that I'll touch upon. Given the fact that you have this capacity, you have this lower latency, you can make trade-offs on what your MIMO order is in the device to have different price points, which actually makes it a really, really good alternative to solutions that might need royalty payments or might need additional fees associated with it. With multi-user MIMO, I think the big push, even with R2, is uplink MU MIMO support. And I think if you have all that data being generated in the car, a lot of that data can actually be used within the car itself. Not everything is going to get uploaded. So that's one. There'll be a lot of local processing going on. But the data that does need to be pushed above, like the embedded camera data, all that terabits of data that the industry is saying, features like MU MIMO, where you can uplink, where you can put that together, really helps you from a performance standpoint. And that's another Wi-Fi 6E selling point as you talk to the OEMs. And then, of course, OFDMA. I mean, with OFDMA and the ability to schedule, and the fact, like the little graphic shows, you can do simultaneous channel usage. You really get the advantage with Wi-Fi 6E that it's still unlicensed. You're not paying IPRs, but at the same time, you are getting some of those 3GPP benefits of scheduling, hence leading to an improved performance as well. I think in this chart, it kind of shows you the vehicle as part of the home network. I think that is a key differentiation. And what I try to show over here with this configuration is you can have the vehicle actually connected to the Wi-Fi network or your home Zigbee IoT gateway type network. You can make the trade-off in addition to the low power inherent enhancements in Wi-Fi 6E, but even at a systems level with the Zigbee integrated, for example, an additional network that pretty much extends that automobile or that car as to an extension of that home network. And I think the home networks are already at the point where they are able to support multiple devices, devices with multiple careabouts. So this is not something that is new to the customer base. Real quick, so I talk about two big use cases on telematics. Given how the product is configured, you can move a lot of data in non-real time. And sensors, for example, or if you have information from a diagnostic standpoint, or you want to contact with the dealership, they want to track what issue might be coming up, and they want to be able to order the part in advance for you. All that is very, very non-real time. And Wi-Fi 6E is well suited to that. If we take a look at the infotainment perspective, this might have, if you want stuff like real-time traffic on maps, could be something that you need cellular coverage for. In some cases, a cellular coverage actually synced up with your smartphone through a 6 gigahertz channel on the car itself. So these are all applications that I think consumers expect to be supported at the baseline Wi-Fi 6E offering. For the sake of time, I'll skip this, but I covered the message earlier. So if we take a look at what is really the end product that actually makes a good fit for automotive, especially as the market shifts towards 6C. We've already seen that the rollout has already started, both in the home. I think that'll probably be first, followed by the enterprise very, very closely, because you do see the benefits that Wi-Fi 6E brings to the table. In terms of new spectrum, you can upgrade from 40 megahertz channels to 160 megahertz channels. You see the benefit of the car being an extended part of the home network. That includes Wi-Fi and Zigbee. So this kind of distills, you do want to make sure that the architecture is capable of supporting that tri-band, that the architecture can be concurrent and coexist with BT/BLE, Zigbee type applications. You don't want to run the battery. You do want to be power efficient. You can leverage the low power per bit 6 gigahertz automatically affords, balanced with TWT. The Zigbee integration actually helps you offload some of the Wi-Fi functionality. And then given the fact that this is a device that will move or might be parked in different places in a commercial garage, the long range inherently Wi-Fi 6E brings to the table. You want the flexibility that CESI brings from motion detection for safety functionality that customers can differentiate on in terms of has someone been left on the back seat of the car, different applications. So the key point over here is with Wi-Fi 6E, you have to be able to provide or you have the ability to actually provide those basic building blocks that not only increase the capacity, reduce the latency, but extend what we are already very used to in terms of the home networks to add more applications above and beyond. The car manufacturers themselves are trying to differentiate from each other as to how integrated that automobile experience can be, especially as data shows many of the folks in the new generation are less attached or enamored by their car than some of their predecessors were. So they want to reinvent that experience. And I think with Wi-Fi 6E and the connectivity it brings, we do get that, especially since the rollout has already started. Wi-Fi, unlike some of the other technologies, does have the cost scaling associated with it. You can have different MIMO products. You can use a dual MAC approach to use the same MIMO channels for more than one band simultaneously. Given the fact that the barrier of entry is different from an IP standpoint, there's a lot more diversity in terms of the solutions, that even vendors today, vendors on this day 3 of your session can provide. And then, of course, with the software flexibility that we've already introduced in service providers or as well as enterprise, you can extend that with those same software APIs to the automakers as well. And I think going back to the enterprise, and I know my colleague is going to talk a little bit more about that in the panel with you next session, with the enterprise moving towards more pass point or the WRIX type approach from WBA, that does provide more opportunity for transactional Wi-Fi connectivity without even having cellular, for example. So a lot of good progress, Klaus.
Yeah, a lot of good progress and tremendous amount of new use cases. And I mean, part of what we wanted to do here for this day was to look at new use cases. And I can certainly say that you have fulfilled that promise. There's a lot going on in automotive that is exciting and I think really interesting to explore because it's obviously also a growth area. And we're going to move into the panel fairly quickly. We have a question here from Uchenna Okonkwo. He says, can Irvin please talk about how Wi-Fi 6 deals with signal access point handover in the automotive aspect when the car is moving on the road? Your previous guest says Wi-Fi isn't suitable for automotive connectivity, but Irvin suggests there's room for Wi-Fi 6 car connectivity. But is his question, do you want to comment on that? I think you're mostly talking about connecting to the car in the offline, well, not in the offline sense, but when it's not moving most of the time.
Exactly. That is correct. So for example, if you are in a commercial garage, you're at a charging station, or you are at a dealership, if you're parked at a, gas station, hopefully not with that electric car, but you have that option to do it in that environment. Correct. Absolutely correct.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.